going to be here.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
Where'd you guys have
Oh, there he is.
Pat?
He's right. Etc. He's in the orange.
Yeah, I know Rob.
Etc. We're the only ones in there, so it's perfect.
Oh, good. We don't have to turn on the TV cameras to double check that. So let's not turn on the cameras yet. Is Councilmember Claycomb connected to the meeting?
I'm here.
Yeah, thank you for unmuting your button. You can mute your button again. See, she complied. We might have to start doing all of our meetings this way.
Only if you voted.
All right, Tyler, you want to give me the thumbs up when, are you going to do the video or we're live?
Thank you for attending today's City Council meeting. Please take a moment to silence your mobile device. If you wish to speak on an agenda item, after the mayor invites public comment, proceed to the podium, state your name and address, and you will be given 5 minutes to speak. A timer can be viewed on the podium screen. You may speak one time per agenda item. Please refrain from clapping after other speakers. Thank you again for joining us today. Let's pause a moment for our television audience to join us.
Welcome to our council meeting. We have a relatively short agenda, and we have Council Member Claycomb, who is representing us in Los Angeles at the National League of Cities meeting, on the phone with us. So Councilmember Claycomb, glad you could join us by phone, and if the Vice Mayor coughs or sneezes one more time, we're going to send him to a quarantined room and he can do this by phone.
All right, I'm in for that.
So keep your...
Good morning.
Good morning. Great to have you here. And so we'll call the meeting to order. The first item we have is to approve the minutes of the regular meeting on October 23rd, 2018. If there are no changes or corrections, I move that we approve those meeting minutes.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We will vote our normal electronic way, and Councilmember Claycomb will register a voice vote.
Yes.
And motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, you want to call the business item?
Ordinance authorizing the issuance of Series 2018 Sales Tax Special Obligation Revenue Star Bonds River District Phase 1 and 2 Star Bond Project.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor and members of the City Council. Sean Henning, Director of Finance. The item before you relates to the issuance of the Star Bonds for the stadium project. To provide a little bit of background, on October 16th, the City Council approved the sale of the stadium Star Bonds and authorized the underwriter as Cruz and Associates. The sale was actually held last week on November 1st, 2018. Also, as part of background, I wanted to remind everybody that the Star Bonds are not general obligations of the city. They are intended to be payable from certain sales tax revenues that are generated from the district and are pursuant to the bond indenture and is authorized by the bond ordinance. The Star Bonds that were sold last week had a par value of $42.14 million. That covers the $40 million in costs related to the stadium improvements themselves, and additional financing costs make up the remainder costs of issuance. Proceeds from the sale will be used to finance the stadium-related improvements and, again, the financing costs. The sale resulted in a rate of 3.915, which is very favorable given the market conditions and the security that we had for issuance of the bonds. The recommended action at this time is to adopt the bond ordinance on a declaration of emergency basis and authorize the necessary signatures.
Are there any questions at this point? Seeing none, we'll go out to the public. Would anyone like to address the council on this agenda item? Seeing none, we'll bring discussion back to the bench. And if I understand this correctly, and it's hard to categorize them exactly, but my understanding is with these favorable interest rates that were basically almost a AAA rated bond in this environment that we're in, getting these kinds of rates.
The rating that came through, we had Moody's Investor Services provide the rating. The rating that we ended up with was a AA3, which is 2 notches below our GO rating of AA1. With these bonds, as you indicated, are a little bit different. So there was a notch taken off our regular rating for the revenue-backed, the sales tax-backed bonds versus our regular property tax ad valorem pledge. The other notch that was taken related to the essentiality of the project. So that's where we ended up with the AA3, which was very good for marketing these types of bonds given the where we are with development on the project.
All right. Yes, Robert.
Sean, I think one of the things I think the mayor was referring to is how we compared to other sales and also to treasury bonds.
Okay. The indices that we took a look at were the Revenue 25 Bond Index at the time of the sale, and that rate was a 4.82. And then another comparative that we took a look at was the Bond Buyer GO 20 Bond Index, and that was 4.33.
So how do we drive those rates down to under 4?
Basically, the pledge and the security for the bonds that we have and the projected revenues that we provided and are reflective in the project to cover the debt service over time, over the 20 years.
Plus, if I can add, I think it's also just the quality of us as an issuer.
So we are still in tremendous shape in terms of our ability to finance. It says a lot about our bottom line and maybe not so much just about the charm and good looks of the mayor.
That would be true.
You didn't have to add that in so quickly.
Yes, you did. It is true.
Although your charm and good looks do help.
That saves you. Councilmember Meissner?
Thank you, Mayor.
Can you tell me, remind me, so how long are these bonds? Do we do these over 21 years? Or?
They're 20.
20 years.
Go out to 2038.
Okay. And a reminder also is that, so we applied to the state for this STAR bond application, sales tax application, and the state came back and told us that we think this could support up to 40 million. So this was not a determined by us at that, as we applied for what we could do on this project, and the state allowed us 40 million.
Yes,
right, Scott?
that's
right?
correct.
Okay. And that one word, essentiality, what does that mean?
Essentiality would relate to...
The mayor? Was that right to the mayor's looks and stuff?
Types of projects that are essential to the city services, which could be public safety, infrastructure, that type of thing.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? And we have a very good track record in this city on top of that for some of our STAR bond projects, which we don't have very many of, but way ahead of schedule in terms of paying off the STAR bond debt, which means that it certainly had the infrastructure in place to support several million more dollars in STAR bonds, but we didn't jump out there, and instead we're going to pay them off very early. And so that, I would think, would bode well for us too. Certainly this makes this project very real at this point, and so I know that this is, again, a project that is centered in Councilmember Bluebaugh's district, and I will offer you up again the opportunity to make this motion if you like.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to make the motion ordinance authorizing the issuance of sales tax special obligation revenue, River District Phase 1 and 2 STAR bond project on declaration of emergency.
And do we need to read in there the total of $43,873,967? Okay. I'll second that. Is that clear enough? We have a motion and a second. Thank you, Councilmember Bluebaugh. Again, this really makes this project come to fruition in full policy form by accepting these bonds and looking forward to this project coming together. So at this point, cast your vote. Councilmember Claycomb?
Yes.
Thank you. And the motion passes 7-0. Thank you all very much. I think that concludes all of our business items. We'll go ahead and adjourn today's meeting before we go into workshop. So I would move that we adjourn today's council meeting.
Second.
We have a motion to adjourn. Again, Councilmember Claycomb, vote by voice. The rest of us cast your vote.
Yes.
And motion passes 7-0. We are adjourned. Councilmember Claycomb, I know you have a busy schedule. Thanks for joining us for the business item, and you can catch up with the workshop online at your convenience.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, take care and represent us well. I know you will.
All right, bye.
So, Robert, we'll turn over the workshop to you.
Members of the council, today we're going to talk a little bit about the process that is moving us towards the construction of the Northwest Water Treatment Facility. We've gone through a number of steps. You've been there along the way from the very beginning with the selection of a team to look at delivery methods, as well as then to actually determine who the successful proponent will be for the construction on a design, build, and operate basis. I don't want to steal the thunder from Alan King, who's going to give this presentation, but we received some really good news last week. We were one of 16 cities, I believe, that received approval to go to the next step on WIFIA funding. It's a significant dollar amount, and I'll let Alan talk more about that. I do want to thank the Mayor and Council for all of their work on this project. A reminder for the public that earlier this year, the Council visited with EPA officials in D.C. specifically about this project and about the importance of WIFIA funding. Because of the rate impact it would have had to construct this plant without WIFIA, there's a good chance we would have had to pause and not been able to move forward with this, although we had other funding alternatives we looked at. None of them were as favorable to the ratepayer as a WIFIA program. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alan to step through, remind you of where we've been, and also make recommendations on where we're going.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Alan King, Director of Public Works and Utilities. As the manager said, there's quite a bit of background preceding this workshop on the Northwest Water Treatment Plant. We started with a utilities optimization phase 1 effort that we did looking at the overall health of the utility and particularly its assets. Coming out of that effort, they performed a risk-based asset condition assessment on all of the assets in the utilities. And one of the key findings was that the highest risk asset was our water treatment plant, both because of its condition and the criticality of the service that it provides. So we looked at various options that might be available to us to replace or enhance or repair or rehab that water treatment plant. And we also looked at funding and construction approaches. We arrived at the notion that WIFIA would be a very attractive option for us to pursue. Because of the terms of the WIFIA loan, it locks in the rate, and the rates are pretty favorable right now. It allows you to start repaying it back 5 years after construction is completed. So that would be maybe even 10 years from now for us. It's a 20-year loan, favorable interest. The effect that it would have on sewer rates would be very favorable compared to other ways of funding it. So we went ahead and decided to move forward with a letter of interest asking EPA to consider us for this loan. In that letter of interest, we had some themes that came out that we were, that this was of a regional, national significance. We're the largest city in the state of Kansas. We serve water to about 500,000 people, and it's a critical function in terms of industry and even things like McConnell Air Force Base. We also talked about the aging infrastructure and utility risk. We referred back to the inspection and the utilities optimization, showing it as a high risk, low condition, risk of failure. And then we also talked about the project timing and risk mitigation. If we could achieve WIFIA funding, it would allow us to pay, to start the project, if we're going to pay it off with an equivalent rate increases that we would have under WIFIA. If we got WIFIA, we could start right away. If we did not get WIFIA and looked at the same kinds of rate increases that WIFIA would require, we would have to delay the construction 7 years. And that was a really big deal in terms of our application and our letter of interest. We also helped them see that the city has a very proactive utility optimization approach, and I think that weighed in our favor. And then also the fact that we have a very adaptive approach in terms of project delivery, financing. The way that we approach this problem also worked in our favor. What I can say is and the manager mentioned, was that we submitted our first letter of interest for WIFIA funding back in April of 2017. We were not invited to apply. We resubmitted a second time in July of this year, and we actually received word here on October 31st, that we were invited to apply. And what that means is, once you get past the letter of interest to an invitation to apply, you're at least 95% of the way of certainty of being able to actually get the application. You have to negotiate out the terms of the agreement that you enter into as part of the loan. But what the good news is that unless we just really make a grave mistake, we pretty much have WIFIA funding available to us. That means that in October 30th, 2019, that no later than that date, we need to have our application in. So in order for us to capitalize on this opportunity, we have to be really smart in the way that we proceed so that we actually do have an application into WIFIA on time. What I can say is I can't stress the importance of this enough, because we've applied, didn't get it, applied again, got it. Now that we've got it, if we, for whatever reason, don't accept and turn in our application, that probably has a very negative effect in terms of a third attempt to apply for WIFIA. So we really got to get this application done.
So can we point to anything in particular from the failure of applying to the success the following year of applying? What was different? Yeah, we met with the EPA people, and they talked about the sort of the sort of things that were in our application that we needed to improve. So, for example, we were overbroad in our application. We applied for both a water treatment plant and a sewer treatment plant, the biological nutrient removal project we have about 10 years out from now. We're not clear in terms of the project approach we're going to do. We talked about the possibility of maybe either a P3 public-private partnership or a design, build, operate, and we said we were considering both of those. That was one of the things that they said they really needed to be. It needed to be clear what was the approach, the project delivery approach that we did. So we corrected both of those. We made it just the water treatment plant. We zeroed in on the design, build, operate, and then also there were the messages that I showed you here. We reinforce those messages throughout our application. When these applications are reviewed, the letter of interest is reviewed, they break it up into pieces and parse it out to different teams. And so the team doesn't have the whole letter of interest. The guidance that EPA gave us was make sure that you hit your key messages in every part of your letter of interest so that when they do parse it out, the people who are reviewing it have the whole story. We had a very competent team that helped us actually put this together, led by Burns and Mack, and they had some expertise on their team that definitely knew what sorts of things were going to score favorably on the application. And then also the mayor and council members went to Washington, D.C., and I think that had a big effect too, and basically letting them know how important this was to the region. All of those things together got us to a point where we were actually invited to apply.
All right, Mayor, if I can, I think one of the things that you heard when you were in Washington and that we try to emphasize was the impact of a failure of this system, and also the impact of not having a reliable and dependable system for the industry here, for our regional partners that we serve, and for McConnell, which was an important element as well. And so I think those are all things that at your urging, based on the EPA feedback, we included as well. Also, we've been talking about WIFIA, but I think we neglected to mention that we have authority now up to $270 million, which is a pretty significant portion of this project.
Can you, and also, excuse me, what was the date that we have to be submitting to negotiate with WIFIA now?
Our application has to be in no later than October 30, 2019, which is a very tight line. It sounds like a long time, like about a year, right? But the amount of work that we have, and I'll talk about this on a future slide, it crams about a year and a half, 2 years worth of work into a year. We think that with the right team that we can get that done, but it's a very aggressive schedule to actually have all the elements of the application together and into EPA on that date.
Alan, there's 24 hours in a day.
And 7 days a week. I've heard you give us permission to work all of those. Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. So, by way of background on this, and the manager talked about this, the consequence of failure, the likelihood of failure, that was one of the things that I think helped our application, helped EPA select our project. We have a treatment plant that has some of the elements go back to 80 years ago. And so we've had a number of failures every year over the last 7 or 8 years. Some of the ones are fairly minor failures in terms of the equipment that's affected, but we get about every other week, we get some kind of a failure that our staff scrambles around and makes repairs to avoid a boil order alert. So you haven't had I shouldn't say this in front of everybody in a public meeting, you haven't had a boil order alert, but it's only because we're able to make the repairs, and we have really good staff that can work around the clock 7 days a week to make sure that happens. We looked at the submitting a RFP back in July 10th to proceed with the construction of this project. We decided to go with the DBO model, design, build, operate, and one step further than that, we decided to go with what's called a progressive DBO. And what that means is you have a team, they have the designers on the team, they have the builders, the contracting entities on the team, and they work together to figure out the best way to provide the treatment plant. And then what you do is you have an operation for some short period of time by that company to get city staff to the point where they can operate it most effectively, most efficiently, with the idea being to save some operation and maintenance costs. And it's progressive in the sense that it's not just one contract with one construction company. The design build team puts together a series of construction packages and puts them out for competitive bid. And so you move along with the players depending on the progress and what you find. So the existing treatment plant is a risk of failure. We needed to take this action to move forward. We don't want to have a catastrophic failure and put 500,000 people without water. And it may not just be for a little while. The kind of catastrophic failures that we could potentially have the possibility of putting us out of water for months. And so we want to get out ahead of this. So what does this schedule look like? The one that's in red there shows that we have got to get this done. It said 10/24 of 2019 with the word from EPA on our WIFIA invitation to apply coming out on the 31st. We can scoot that 1 week later and make that 10/30/2019. But as you can see, it's a very tight timeline. We need to get the work that we need to get done in this is we need to come up with a 30% design. That's a lot of the work. And then you also have to come up with the necessary environmental assessment documentation, negotiate a guaranteed maximum price in the terms of that the contract for phase 2, and develop an O&M plan. This would all be done under phase 1 of this effort. So we'd select a team and proceed with phase 1. Phase 1 meaning doing the 30% design and the contract and the guaranteed maximum price. And if we can get to a guaranteed maximum price that's acceptable, we bring it to council for approval to proceed with phase 2, and that's when the actual finishing of the design and construction takes place. To do this amount of work, again, I can't stress this enough, in a year basically is a very aggressive plan. Even a month's delay puts the jeopardy of being able to meet that deadline. So we expect it to take 12 months, and we've got a plan now with the very aggressive schedule, including the RFP that we issued, to be able to get that done. So when we talk about design, build, operate, we had 2 proposers. And what I would like to say is that both proposers are very good proposers. We had the luxury of selecting between 2 good proposers. That's not always the case. But in our particular case, we had 2 very competent proposers to choose from. And when we looked at the relative merits of each of the 2 teams, it was tough. But what we looked at was, for example, on the design side, Jacobs, that was one of the proposers. Their design of treatment would be non-local. And what that meant is that they would farm that out to other offices not here in the Wichita area. And the same thing with the design of the pipelines, because you have to not only build a treatment plant, but the pipelines that get it into our distribution system, which is a considerable part of this project. Whereas Wichita Water Partners, their treatment was non-local, if you could call Kansas City non-local, but certainly not within the Wichita area. But the pipeline, their team had designed for the pipelines that were local consulting firms. On the build side, they both talked about the necessity of engaging local construction companies. Approximately 70% Jacobs is looking for a target for the construction to be accomplished by local construction companies. And Wichita Water Partners talked about a significant local construction plan. When you look at their team members, they are local construction companies on the Wichita Water Partners. And they were actually part of the proposing team.
So are you planning on putting in the contract that they must use 70% local contractors? Otherwise, how can you make that claim?
That is a claim made in the proposal, and as part of the negotiation of the contract, that is certainly a term that could be included in that negotiated contract. We have only begun talking with Jacobs at this point, and they have volunteered to put something like that in the contract, and so it's yet to be established what form that would take in the actual contract at this point. But you're right, sir, Mr. Mayor, it is a claim as part of the presentation that was made at the proposal only. So the other part of it was...
Yes.
One second. Is this all right that we're asking during the slides, or do you want to wait till the end?
It'll befuddle Alan a little bit, but that's okay.
Actually, if I had to remember everything to the end of the presentation, that would surely befuddle me, so I appreciate the questions.
Yeah, just out of curiosity, on the design section, the pipelines from the Wichita Water Partners, we call them WWP or whatever, the pipelines, we have, is this the pipelines from the treatment center to our distribution center? It's not a redesign of our 2,400 miles of distribution, right?
Correct. It would be the pipelines. They're really large diameter pipelines that would go from the new water treatment plant at the Northwest treatment plant site there on Zoo Boulevard. You have to put in at least one pipe, maybe if you can two for redundancy, pipelines from there to the close to the existing water treatment plant where our high volume pump station is located, and that all the water that goes into our distribution system comes from there, but we got to get the water to there. So that's what we mean by pipelines.
So there's already a pipeline coming from Cheney or the aqueous beds it's going to be parallel to that area?
There are pipelines, raw water pipelines from both the Wellfield from the north and from Cheney, just as you said, sir. What we're talking about is finished water. So once the treatment plant completes treating the water, transmitting that water, that finished water, to our distribution system.
Can't you use the raw water pipeline to push the treated water back to the storage wells that we have near the existing plant?
Well, we want to make sure that we don't have any contamination of finished water with untreated water. So we want to make sure there is some level of separation. But you raise a really good point, Mr. Mayor. We are looking at some of the old transmission pipelines that have since been abandoned, and is there a way for us to reuse some of those? So that's one of the things that they're looking at.
And the thing that I just was wondering, that existing network or the existing water pipeline, that's been there for a while, I assume. But with the Jacobs plan to design on that is a non-local, but I would guess that the local people would probably already got a history with that network, with that pipeline today, right?
Yes, sir, that's right. That's definitely an advantage of retaining the services of a local firm who's familiar with the routing and the other utilities that are there, the challenges of getting a very large diameter pipe through neighborhoods, essentially. And so having local participation is a very desirable thing in terms of that part of the project.
Okay, thanks.
So we have the design, the build, the operate. We're talking about short-term operation, not an ongoing 30-year commitment or what have you. It's no more than 5 years to make sure that our team is up to speed, our operators. That was one of the things that we did look at as far as P3, public-private partnership, that delivery model. It had a permanent operation approach for it. And when you look at the savings that can result long-term from that kind of arrangement, it made it very attractive to us. So we're trying to take the best, a hybrid approach, which is to have a smarter, more efficient way of operating our plant and to build the plant in such a way that it requires a higher level of skill, more automation, so you can realize these ongoing operation and maintenance costs. And part of that necessarily is to get the training to our staff. So we need some kind of a transition from our existing staff from operating the existing water treatment plant to operating the new water treatment plant.
Right. James, did you have a question?
Yeah, I do. So you kind of answered my question. We're saying no more than 5 years. So if there's a need to train our staff for 5 years, that means, well, our staff will be working alongside of the team that's chosen to operate. Our staff will retain their jobs and have ongoing learning for 5 years?
Up to yes, sir. Up to 5 years. So we would have what it would look like is our staff would be training with their staff on the operation of the new facility. And when there were times when we had to spend a lot of our staff time over there, they would backfill what our staff is doing at the old water treatment plant, because for some short period of time, we would still be operating the existing water treatment plant. So it would be a double cost in some cases for some period of time, but we think that that's an expense that we can pay up front to realize greater savings long term with a more efficient O&M approach.
Do you anticipate it being a 5-year transition?
No, sir, I don't. Personally, I don't think it'll be all 5 years, but we didn't want to box ourselves in, and we wanted to make sure that we represented this to council, to kind of the worst case, most expensive approach that we might have to take. I anticipate it'll be something significantly less than 5 years.
Thanks.
Yeah, because I understood we were initially looking at maybe a 2-year training cycle. Yeah, what, 5 years? We could train Bob Layton to do the job in 5 years.
And how long is the construction? Anticipated? Or maybe that's in your deal.
Well, the full design, build, getting all the way to handing it over, to giving us the keys to the new treatment plant, no more than 5 years. So part of that is going to be in the design, obviously. So construction somewhere around 4 years. Fortunately, we don't have the kind of deadline hanging over us like we do with the application to EPA. It takes as long as it takes, but any kind of slides, any kind of schedule slides have the potential for increased costs. So we don't want it open-ended.
And is that WIFIA approved number, Bob? You said 270 million. We just do that's all capital application. We can't put the operating in that. Some of these operating costs, if we get a bid and says it's going to be X for operations.
It is for capital costs. 49% of the capital costs are covered by WIFIA. Okay. We'd have to come up with the other 51%, probably through the state revolving loan fund. And that would pretty much cover the entire capital costs of the project.
Okay. Thanks.
So we have two very competent teams bidding, advantages and disadvantages of both. When you look at the design side of the proposals, the treatment plant design, the modeling and asset management was by one firm out of Denver and another out of Corvallis, Oregon. The pipeline and supporting assets design was Wood Engineering. They have a Wichita office. And Jacobs has said that they want to work with other local firms on supporting the design. I don't know if they've actually made contact yet, but in our conversations, they've said they are going to be reaching out to members of the Wichita Water Partners team to ask them to participate in that part of the project. They identified a separation between design and design quality assurance, quality control. Which is really forward thinking in terms of what progressive design build projects have is on the design side. The risk management is integrated in all the design decisions, and they had a gentleman there talking about the model that they used to manage the risk associated with the project. And they had a 3D modeling integrated into all aspects of the project, which is pretty standard these days. So they didn't really bring anything unexpected other than the risk management piece kind of stood out. In terms of the Wichita Water Partners, the treatment plant design was led by the sub firm HDR out of Omaha. They do modeling and asset management by HDR and Burns & Mack out of Kansas City. Their pipeline and supporting assets design were sub firms PEC, MKEC, GLMV, all local firms that and PEC in particular is very familiar with the pipeline through the neighborhood. They have an overlap of individuals involved in both the design and design QA/QC. They discuss the need for further risk allocation discussions during the design, and so they recognize too that that's an important part of the contract and the ultimate approach that we have between the city and the DB team. And then they also use 3D modeling for designer and builder firm constructability. So a lot of comparability between the two. As far as the build is concerned, Jacobs in their presentation said that they will issue competitive bid packages for at least 70 to 80% of the project locally. Their subcontractor, McCarthy, is planning to hire locally as demonstrated on the current project on a current project that they have in Kansas. The mayor, you mentioned that this was a suggestion made in a presentation. It doesn't in any way now take the form of a contract presently. They would be targeting a projected completion in 3 months early than what it is that we're talking about, is getting the application into the to EPA. That's a very aggressive target. Identify potential areas of impact on surrounding properties, mitigating measures, and that has a lot to do with the environmental impacts and the impact that the construction project would have on the area. And then they identified labor needs and ability to work with design to flatten the need rather than short-term spikes. A project like this is big enough that it's going to require a significant labor force to construct it. And so what you want to try to avoid are spikes during the construction period where you're hiring and laying people off. It's to your advantage to levelize that workload. And Jacobs, in their presentation, provided us with a rather detailed plan about how they would accomplish that, recognizing the need to have a levelized workforce. And if we're talking about an economic benefit to the local businesses, local workforce, that's very much in their, to the city's benefit if we have a stable workforce during that 4 years. Wichita Water Partners, Alberici Construction was part of the joint venture with the subcontractors of 3 local firms. They would also have competitive bid packages to decide about 80% of the construction responsibilities. Having a contractor on the DBO term, local contractors like Donlinger and Wildcat, having those on the contract team or the design team is very important because they can inform the design. And so that's the whole idea of the design build. Both firms have contractors on the as contributing to the design part of the project. And as far as the build goes, because it's a progressive DBO approach, you want to take advantage of competitive pricing. So both firms would be putting together bid packages and then having a competitive bid process to select who would be doing various aspects of the project.
Excuse me, Al.
Yes, sir.
So we say both firms are saying Jacobs and Wichita Water Partners would be issuing bids for the build part?
Yes, they would be doing what they call competitive bid packages, where they take the project and break it into a package, a package of related construction needs, and then they would be putting that out to get a competitive price. So it's not as though ahead of the project you lock in different construction companies. What you do is you have those construction companies help you figure out what those design packages should be like, and that should help them be favorably competitive in that process. They were part of development of the design, part of the development of the design or of the bid packages that should assist them or help them in being successful in getting the actual award of the contract, but it's still competitively bid, and that's a very important aspect of a progressive design build approach.
Well, I agree, and a question that just, of course, I'm not in the construction business, but if I look at Jacobs saying that 70–80% will be project locally, so if they issue their bid package and what's their plan B? If their bid package, if the responses locally don't meet what Jacobs says is in their bid package, what do they do then?
You raise a really good point, because there's going to be expectations of what those competitive prices will be, and that's going to be part of their guaranteed maximum price. And so they're going to want to hold those prices to some level. And if they don't get the kind of favorable pricing that they would want, they have as a backup the McCarthy Construction, which is a very large construction company, who could take that up, unless you had some kind of a provision in the contract that required a certain percentage of participation by local firms, in which case that will probably affect your guaranteed maximum price. It's all a matter of weighing risks on our side and on their side. If we want to reduce the risk of having more construction outside of the local companies, then what they would need is to reduce that risk by increasing our guaranteed maximum price. And that's on both sides.
And where's McCarthy out of?
I don't know.
All right. St. Louis?
St. Louis.
So would they then, if they had to go to this plan B, would they ship in construction people for the 2 or 3 year construction time?
They'd probably do like they did, and I can't remember the name of the treatment plant that they did, where they try to hire local folks into their construction projects. It's a matter of, I don't know if they have a whole workforce situated and waiting in St. Louis. They'd have to reach out to labor construction company, or people, labor.
All right.
Okay, go on.
So on the last part of the DBO is the operate. Jacobs provided multiple examples of short-term operations with a transition to a city, and they gave us some examples of what they looked at. They talked about an extensive training plan that they would develop, and the training included what they call a flight simulator, which is a virtual SCADA control system, as though you're actually operating the plant, and then they can throw in, like a flight simulator, they can throw in problems and say, if you encounter this sort of a problem, how would you solve it? And it gives them hands-on ability as though they're actually operating the treatment plant. That would continue to be our tool even after the term is over on their operating. We continue to have that flight training tool, and they described that. Jacobs presently operates more than 200 U.S. water and wastewater facilities, and their competitive procurement for who would be actually providing this service, they included it in their proposal as part of this presentation. So the competitive procurement process was both for design, build, and operate. So the way that they accomplished the competitive procurement of the operations part of it was to make it part of this presentation, part of this proposal, a package of all 3 services. Wichita Water Partners has 1 municipal utility and 2 private operation firms as subs during the design, which is very important to have the input of the operations folks as part of the design part of it. They provided a general approach and methods to operations and training. It was feasible, it was believable on how they would actually accomplish the training. The 3 subcontract operators conduct operations for more than 200 water treatment plants. So the ones that they have as the consultants have a wide range of history in terms of operations, and that they would have a competitive procurement would occur in the summer of 2019. So the competitive procurement would be a process following this process that we just underwent. So they different.
I'm not sure why you felt the need to have a bullet point that says 3 subcontractors operate more than 200 water treatment plants. You could just simply say Wichita Water Partners operate more than 200 water treatment plants. The reality is both firms are using extensive subs all the way through the process, and you've already established that subs are going to be critically important to both teams all the way through the process. So I'm not sure why the need to have a bullet that says Wichita Water Partners have subs that are doing this work. Both teams are going to have subs doing particular different activities.
Yes, there's the work will be divided up among the different members of the team. You're absolutely right. You know, the three subcontract operators, maybe it wasn't effective in the way that it was worded, but it was to try to make the point that these were not part of the presentation of what would actually be judged in this competitive procurement process. They will be providing consulting services, but it'll be a separate later effort. Those three or maybe even others as far as who the operator would end up being. So that's my attempt to explain it. So as far as experience, two very experienced companies, teams. Jacobs has a proven design build and design build operate and design build short-term operate experience. They gave us examples. They've identified specifically DBO teams on projects of 30, 100, and 180 million gallons a day, so projects of comparable size, big projects. They identified 9 water treatment plants that were at our size or larger, and they developed or reviewed 8 of the 12 WIFIA applications for 2017. And so what I can tell you is that out of this WIFIA invitations to apply, like we just got here at Wichita, they received the similar from San Mateo, California, and from North Miami Beach. So they were successful in actually bringing a letter of interest to an invitation to a bid out of this round. In the same way that the existing, that the Wichita Water Partners, the Burns and Mack group there, they were successful in bringing us this water treatment plant WIFIA invitation.
Now, we're familiar with Jacobs because they acquired another firm that we teamed with in the past.
Yes, sir. CH2M.
So Jacobs acquired CH2M Hill, and to be fair, CH2M Hill is who applied for us in 2017 when we didn't get WIFIA, and the Wichita Water Partners is the team that successfully navigated us through the process of getting WIFIA.
That's correct, sir.
Okay. Just want to make it clear because you're kind of trying to make a different point there, but go on.
So on the Wichita Water Partners, they have proven design build experience. No design build operate projects were identified. I think they rely on the members of their teams that they brought in that really do that nationally and internationally. They did identify 3 water treatment plant projects at the Northwest Treatment Plant size or larger, 1 as a designer and 1 as a builder and 1 as a design builder. So they have experience in these kinds of projects. And they did sub-engineering firm developed one of the 2017 WIFIA applications. That's Burns and Mack, which was successful. And that was, so the member on this team that helped us was successful in actually making that result in an invitation on a WIFIA. So when we look at the experience in a summary of that, Jacobs as a DBO had these 3 treatment plants at Washington and California. As you can see the sizes of them. As just design build without operate, they had these projects ranging anywhere from 15 million gallons a day to 320 million gallons a day at Houston. Wichita Water Partners, they didn't identify for us any design build operate projects, but as a design builder, they had the Wichita ASR treatment facility that the city presently operates, Wichita chemical feed replacement, a 20 million gallon a day treatment plant up in Thornton, Colorado, and they were involved as team members in some aspects of the project in Omaha, 100 million gallon a day in Omaha and a 160 million gallon a day one at Omaha, and a membrane water treatment plant in North Dakota. So both of them have experience. At least we didn't get a proposal where they wanted to do this kind of a project but hadn't any experience. We had two good teams with the kinds of experience that we were looking for. So the two proposing teams made presentations. We had a team of 11 members on the selection committee, one member from a wholesale community. When you look at all different kinds of perspectives and backgrounds, 175 years of combined experience with the city. We had senior and mid-level management and multiple departments. So it was a very, I believe, well-selected committee in terms of evaluating the two proposals that were presented. And when you look at the average selection score, the Jacobs team got 89 and the Wichita Water Partners got 80. And when you look at the number of members ranking the team as the preferred, it was unanimous. All 11 members ranked Jacobs as the #1 choice. So those were the results that came out of the selection process. So when we look at the specifics of what made Jacobs' proposal kind of stand out and be attractive was their simultaneous construction in separate work areas. They gave us some example of and tied into the labor force levels. They said, you know, the way that this thing is laid out, you have two buildings next to each other, and the way that it's, what you'd have to do is you'd have to construct one building and then backfill before you could start the other building. If you move it 15 feet away, you can build the two buildings at the same time and be able to levelize your workloads. They gave us a specific example about construction sequencing and how that related to labor force leveling out. They also talked about the speed of the construction, level of outskilled labor needs. That was attractive. That was one of the things we had a concern about. Is this going to be a completely out-of-town effort, or is this going to be using some local work companies? And they talked about the competitive bid packages, which is absolutely essential to a successful progressive design build, that they would, in fact, not just do all the work to their contractor on their team, but put out competitive bid packages. So when you look at the sequence #1, #2, 3, it shows the different parts of the building that they, of the site that they would build. From our perspective, it was a very well thought out and reasoned sequence of construction. So that was, construction sequence was, I would say, one of the things that was very attractive from the Jacobs presentation. Risk-based gross guaranteed maximum price. Design and construction costs is a primary driver of rate increases. We recognize that. And what we would want is to look at a guaranteed maximum price that would minimize the rate impacts that would be necessary to support it. They have a risk and opportunity tool that they said was industry standard, which gives two kind of major or generally accepted approaches in the allocation of risk between the DBO team and the city. And so they would work it with both ways, and as part of the guaranteed maximum price negotiations would present both of those as part of that negotiation, which would help us try to get an understanding of what risk the city is taking on and what the cost is for that risk. And what we want to make sure is that we understand the relationship between the price and what it is that's delivered to the city. One of the things that we want to make sure that we avoid, and we're able to do that with the design build proposal or project, is we don't necessarily go with the lowest price. That's more of a design bid build approach where you accept the lowest bid. What you want to do is you want to accept the lowest price for the treatment plant that you need. And we had as phase one who helped us with the WIFIA letter of interest, Burns and Mack, and we went through a very extensive analysis of what do you need, not what is the lowest price possible, but what is the lowest price on what it is you need. And one of the things, for example, was risk. We're still going to end up with just one water treatment plant. That's a single point of failure. So one of the things that we spent a lot of money adding to the price tag was to have a level of redundancy in the design of the treatment plant. Now, that isn't the cheapest treatment plant that you can build, but we got the lowest price estimate on a treatment plant that had the necessary redundancy in it. If you're going to have a single water treatment plant, if something major component of the treatment plant goes down, you have redundancy so that you can redirect the treatment process and still continue to be able to provide water. So it's really important for us to look at a guaranteed maximum price that isn't just the lowest price, it's the lowest price for what it is we need in a water treatment plant. So that's why only 5% of the selection process, the scoring, was based on price. We actually waited and had sealed bids on what the price would be for the design for the phase one, with the idea that you want this to be a qualification-based selection and not just a low bid. So that was one of the thinking that we have in getting to where we are now. We want to make sure that that thinking continues on in the negotiation of guaranteed maximum price, and that we don't look at just lowest price, but lowest price for what it is we need. On the O&M plan, the WIFIA application requirement is that we have a defined O&M plan. That was one of the things that they would be able to give us early, is because they could actually make it as part of what it is they're proposing and part of the contract we would negotiate. We'd want to make sure that that O&M was integrated into their organization as far as the design, build, and operate, that they had experience in doing exactly that, and that they had a good, credible, viable transition plan from operating the treatment plant themselves to eventually going to staff operating it. And then the flight simulator that I talked about earlier to help our staff understand and train, and for new hires to train on the new water treatment plant. So in conclusion, our key takeaways were that the city received 2 strong proposals, absolutely. The delays to the schedule endangers WIFIA, and it was a thing that I emphasized hopefully at the beginning of this, which is we're on a real short track. We're still on a really short track. Whatever we do and contemplate moving forward, we have to be mindful of meeting that October 2019 deadline to be able to get our application in, or we risk WIFIA funding. The selection committee unanimously recommends Jacobs with the experience with O&M in the organization and the reasons that I talked about earlier, and that we believe, the selection committee believes that this represents the best team and schedule to minimize the rate increases through a lower guaranteed maximum price and a successful WIFIA application. So recommended future actions we would like to, for staff or for council to anticipate. On the November 20th council meeting, we would like to bring the phase 1 of the DBO contract with Jacobs, the contract for that, to council for consideration. We would like to get permission from council to go ahead and prepare for the WIFIA loan application, and also start preparing the paperwork for the state revolving fund loan application. And on the rate adjustments, we would like to present to council some different rate scenarios and to get approval for a rate increase that supports what we're talking about here. And that what we'd also like to do is to get permission from council to proceed with a request for proposal for a owner's rep on the project, an owner's representative, so that we have someone who represents the city and is not part of this DBO team to make sure that our interests are being protected through the construction project. And that's what we would be bringing to council on November 20th, if the council so wishes. And that concludes my presentation.
Okay, conversations from the council, directions. I'm going to share some unique perspectives, and just will preface what I'm saying first by acknowledging that we're plowing new ground here. This city has never taken up a contract of this size or nature in the history of the city of Wichita. Now, we have successfully, obviously, navigated to this point, and we appreciate the Wichita Water Partners for helping us navigate to this point. And I think it's nice that we acknowledge there's 2 quality teams that potentially can do this. The reality is, at this point, everything that you have presented to us is pie in the sky. There are claims, some claims made that'll be hard to back up, some claims made that could have financial repercussions if, for instance, they can't get local bidders, and it's going to alter the maximum price then that they can then achieve on this project. And so there's too much pie in the sky. On a $500 million project, $500 million project, there's a way for us to cut through the pie in the sky, and that's let both teams go forward with a DBO. And I would like for us to look at that. We could do it on the same timeline. It'll create a little more work for staff, but not too much, because you're not reinventing everything per se. And then at the end of that, you don't have pie in the sky. You have substantiated, quantified data with a 30% build out that I've been doing some research, some have said could save you as much as potentially 15% on the total maximum price of a project of this nature. That's real money. That's significant dollars. And the state of Kansas has an ordinance that allows that to happen, because we don't have to go out for a bid, period, for professional services. And I know this is a relatively new approach, but the reality is we haven't been doing DBOs in this area very long. That's a relatively new approach for us. So I would like for this council to consider looking at, throw out the pie in the sky, let's get to quantifiable data that then allows us to select the best team. And they can do it on the same timeline. And then you get rid of a number of risk factors at that point. And you have a very competitive process where someone up front just can't make a claim that might sound great, but there's no way to substantiate that until you get further along in the process. Councilmember Blueball.
Thank you, Mayor. Since it was a unanimous vote, I would like to hear from our representative that participated on that, if they have any input or...
Wow, I mean, it was very thorough. Just the detail that went through, the thought process from the construction sequencing to the, geez, I can't even remember everything, because it was a full day that we went through it. The amount of detail that went through the sequencing, the risk management, that was a lot of time spent on it, and making sure that, you know, through all the decisions, that there's a process in place. The use of the 3D modeling was just more thorough, it felt like. Again, both were great presentations, and again, having a lot of local subcontractor use in both of them. But for the reasons that Alan said, I think that was pretty unanimous. So the mayor's idea here, I'm wondering how that would affect our WIFIA application and doing something like that. Would that be able to fit in that timeline?
Councilmember, what the mayor's suggesting is it's doable and possible.
Okay.
It does introduce a compression to the schedule because of some steps that you'd want to put in place prior to cutting the two teams loose. And probably the most important part of that is the selection criteria. So you have two teams proceeding. How are you then at the end of that, at the 30%, going to evaluate one of the members compared to the other? You certainly do not want to use low price. In other words, who's going to be able to come up with the lowest price design? That defeats the entire philosophy and approach of a design, build, operate, progressive design build. You don't want it based on lowest price, because you can get a very low priced treatment plant that you're going to wish that you had not built 10, 15 years later. It has to be able to meet the requirements. So you'd have to look at ways of defining what the minimum requirements would be so that those were all covered. And you'd want it to be based more than on just the end price of the effort. You want it to also be based on things like constructability and what have you. Similar to the criteria that we just had in place for this selection process. I'm guessing that if we were to put together a second set of criteria, it would look very similar to the set of criteria that we just used for this process. Probably to do that, you're looking at, I want to say conservatively, 30 days to be able to put that together and to give them the chance to provide the questions and to proceed. I could be wrong on that. But even 30 days might have quite an effect on our ability to hit that end deadline. If we were smart and could accomplish that, then what the mayor is suggesting may be able to really provide us with some benefits. It's yet another layer of competition, right? But we want to make sure that we were really clear on what would the criteria be to measure the end result in that competition. I don't know, did that answer your question, sir?
Yeah, somewhat. Again, I know, like the mayor said, this is uncharted territory. We've never had a single public infrastructure project of this size before, so it is kind of a new territory. And so going through it, we need to make sure we are checking all the boxes and looking at all the possible solutions to reduce the impact on taxpayers, ratepayers, I should say. So, I mean, it is a challenging decision, and I don't want to step off too fast, too aggressive, and maybe miss an opportunity to lower costs. So I'd want to explore that.
Councilmember Meisner.
Thank you. First of all, I'm glad that we're having this workshop, because I would hate to have this come in front of us and try to approve or not as an agenda item. But and I've had some discussions with some to try to learn about this. And Vice Mayor, thanks for being on the committee. Those are not small tasks. I mean, but with that, what I'm really concerned about, I've expressed this to the manager and maybe one of you, is that this is the next 50 years of our water to our citizens. I mean, it's a large project, as we've talked. But I was really glad looking back that we had we've approved and completed some projects in this community. I think based on real discipline and watchdog pricing, such as we weren't involved in the interest arena, but I think it came in at a price with a decent product that people. It's a great product. It ends up being a great success. We went, as a council, we went through extensively with, some of us were here on the Eisenhower Airport, and I think based on some really focused numbers and debate, and I think the vote wasn't unanimous, but we got it down to a price that we could stay in and a product that we're very proud of today, similar to the new library. Now those are smaller, 100 million was that, and 20 million or 25 was the library. So, but what I don't want to happen is what I'm reading or hearing in the news about, like the Kansas City Airport project. It estimated at $1 billion, and I don't know what process they went through. I think the city is arguing one way and citizens the other and airlines the other, but it's gone from $1 billion to $1.6 billion or $1.7 billion, and what I don't want the future council and future staff to think, well, if it goes up, because it's not really defined, it's just going to be the ratepayers. And I don't want us to be comforted by thinking you can just pass on any overruns or change orders or soft costs or what all those big words are, to just assume that. So we're making a decision now that councils 15, 20 years from now are going to have to manage. And we don't like managing today what was not happened in the 90s on other projects. So with that, I'm just really concerned about this. I like whatever we can throw in, like the mayor's suggestion, that helps keep us as a city, staff, council, honest with what's the best product for our citizens, the 13 communities that we provide. Because Derby's not going to weigh in on it. They're going to just get the results. McConnell's not calling us saying, hey, do this or that. They just get So it's a burden for us. And I think it's really good if we continue to have measurement points that allow us to be comfortable with. I don't care what the price is. I just want it to be right for the future. This word, guaranteed maximum price, kind of scares me. I don't think I totally understand it. So that's just my comments. My last question is, who came up with the acronym NWWTF? How do we say that?
Yeah. New treatment plant.
Yeah, there you go. The acronym committee kind of messed. Okay, thanks. Thanks for the presentation.
If I could just jump in. I understand, obviously this is a large project. It's the second largest DBO project in the country, I think. So, I mean, we do want to get it right. It's important that we do that. I think this is a good delivery method. The mayor shared with me his suggestion on doing this. It does come at a price, and so we may want to look at options that get us there, but maybe not quite with the cost. If we were to have two parallel tracks, each team would receive about $5 or $6 million, so that increases the expense on the front end. So then we have to talk, the mayor's talked about the possibility of savings on the back end. We'd have to talk about how, if that is true, or we can prove that there would be that kind of savings, then that obviously offsets the additional cost. There may be some other things we can do in terms of owner's rep or joint venture. I don't know. We'll have to explore. But I understand the concern about having multiple eyes on this to ensure we're getting the right cost. And so our project is affordable. So if we we'll have a little time here between now and the 20th to bring some options, look at some options and bring them forward.
Well, it's about mitigating risk also. And this would mitigate a heck of a lot of risk. Anyone have anything else?
It was a great presentation to get up to speed. How thick were the applications? That thick, so we got it in 45 minutes. So thank you,
Councilmember Clendenin.
Yeah, I just want to clarify. I don't know, Bob or Alan, if you can clarify this for me. Do we already have a operation consultant contract with Jacobs?
Yes, sir, we do. They're acting as a consultant to lead our staff-based utilities optimization efforts. So they're one of a few consultants that will be coming along board. Another one would be chemical reductions in chemical energy costs. We'll probably use, I'm guessing, Burns and Mac on that one. So we have a few different consulting companies that we anticipate will be helping us. But you're right, Jacobs presently is helping us with the initial getting off the ground of the utilities optimization project.
But that had a defined timeline when they
finished
that.
That was my next question.
And a defined scope. Again, this is so that, just a reminder, we need that operational savings in order to be able to fund our pro forma.
Right.
So that's why we recognize we had a core group of employees that could work on the optimization, but we needed supplemental assistance, and so they're employed for a portion of that.
The reason I asked is because obviously they're on the operations side of this as well, and if the contract that we currently had with them, the operations consulting contract, extended through this project already. So
it's only on existing operations, not on a new plant.
I see.
And it's year to year, and so they have an engagement with us for the year, and if we find that there may be additional help they can provide us and guide us on getting a staff-led effort, we could do a renewal a year at a time.
I would just be a little bit careful because we know at this point in time we're going to cease operations of the old plant, and so any long-term optimization is just throwing money away, obviously, at this point in time.
Yes, sir. We're aware of the implications of one treatment plant going away and another coming in its place. So we're looking at things like pump stations, the 5 sewer treatment plants,
right,
the way that we're operating our collection and distribution systems. We're not sinking this all or any big part of it into the existing treatment plant because we know that it's most likely to go away, or at least parts of it go away.
Right. Any other direction anyone want to provide? Do you have enough direction? All right, thank you. I think that concludes our workshop. Anything else? Very good. Thank you all.